welcome back to another week of oil painting on our still life of these apples. So this week we finally get to go to those really detailed pieces like those dewdrops, the blade of the knife, really refining any of those highlights. Maybe you want to show off some of those grains in the planks. That's up to you, but this is the time. Now we get to add those details. So what we're going to be doing is actually using two mediums. We're going to be using NeoMeGILP and we're going to be using solvent-free gel. So how do you know when to use them? You're going to be using NeoMeGILP when you want to create a smooth transition between values, or when you want to really intensify the existing value that's underneath it. So for example, you're going to see me glaze on some darks to create not only hard edges, but then also diffused edges. All right, so that's what I'm going to be using NeoMeGILP. Now when I use solvent-free gel, that's what I want this intense, thick paint to show. And so you'll see me do that a lot with the highlights, where I'm using either pure titanium white, or I'm going to be using a mixture of titanium white with cadmium yellow medium. Okay, so if you're ready, let's sit back and watch what I've done in 2 days in a video that takes probably about 10 minutes. All right, sit back, relax. In order to more easily manipulate the subject, sometimes you have to change the angle of the painting rather than change the angle of the brush. Here I'm reconstituting and refining the dark edge of the blade with a mix of ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and sap green. Slow and easy for details like this. Notice how I'm using only the tip of the brush for the sharp edges. We are now getting into the fine details of the painting. Here I'm using a touch of alizarin crimson and burnt umber to identify the shadows of the dewdrops. It just takes a little but a deliberate touch for the shadow. The important piece to remember is where the light source exists. Here the light source is in upper left, so the shadow under the dewdrop will fall in the lower right. The brush that I'm using is the number 2 Rosemary & Co. Evergreen Long Flat. This evergreen has quickly become one of my favorite brushes because of the sharp edged shape of the bristles, which allows me to get nice and controlled edges in these small details. Using a ruler to steady my hand was a trick that I picked up in 2014 from another artist who had been painting for over 60 years. Before this trick, I used my pinky on the panel to steady my hand. The ruler is much more effective. I took a day break from painting to allow for the paint to dry on the knife. Today, my plan is to finish with the sparkles using titanium white, and if needed, add another layer of transparent darks using alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, and sap green. Notice how I've shifted the painting again so I can more effectively draw the whites on the blade. For these final touches of white, I'm using solvent-free gel with the titanium white to create a raised paste effect. The medium solvent-free gel allows for the paint to dry faster while at the same time keeping the appearance of the original thickness of the paint. In this final stage of painting, I'm adding more intense highlights to the apples using titanium white and cadmium yellow medium. Now, depending on what effect I want to happen, I'll either use solvent-free gel to create that thick paint, or I'll use Neo-Megilp when I want the underlayer to come through, or when I want a smoother value transition. Here I'm adding some sharp, dark shadows to the cloth using a transparent mixture of alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, and sap green. And then I'm also finding where those colors would be needed to go and further intensify the sharp edges or even smooth those diffused edges to create those three-dimensional objects. I'm still wanting to really punch up that red in some places, so I'm using a mixture of Naphthol red, cadmium orange medium, and a touch of burnt sienna with some Neo-Megilp. And finally, I think the handle of the knife needs a little attention. So I'm creating a mixture of burnt umber with Neo Magill to glaze in more intense shadows. The beauty of this glaze is I can quickly add it and then soften the transition with the already dry layer using a soft dry brush. Now that I've added some more intense darks to the handle of the knife, I need to add a little bit more light. So I'm using a mixture of yellow ochre, cadmium yellow medium, titanium white, along with solvent-free gel to create that little touch of highlight.